Since 1934, Iowa's farmers have turned to the Iowa Farm Bureau spokesman as their trusted news source. Now, the Spokesman Speaks. Listen in and hear from leading experts on topics important to farmers and agriculture. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our January 1st edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler, and today we are laying the groundwork for a productive new year with Will Bowen, a speaker who's known internationally for his complaint-free movement, and R.J. Layher of the American Farm Bureau, who will update us on where things stand with a couple of national policy priorities for agriculture. Let's start with R.J., who's a Director of Government Affairs for the American Farm Bureau. As we begin 2024, we're all wondering, when will Congress act on a new long-term farm bill? And with California's Proposition 12 law scheduled to go into effect starting today, what's next for livestock farmers in Iowa and across the nation? Spokesman editor Tom Block had a chance to ask RJ about those issues and more during Iowa Farm Bureau's annual meeting held last month.
RJ, thanks for joining me here to talk a little bit about some national policies going on in Washington, D.C. The first thing that's on a lot of people's mind is the Farm Bill. We just got through a one-year extension. Talk about where that brings us and look ahead to next year, the possibilities of getting a longer 5-year Farm Bill done.
Yeah, I think, we got the one-year extension here a few weeks ago. Farm Bureau, we were happy to have that extension because it gave certainty to our producers, certainty that the programs that they utilize will be available to them. But going forward, we want to make sure that we've got a 5-year Farm Bill that meets the needs of our members, and we're going to keep the foot on the gas to make sure that we get it done in a timely fashion so that we don't have to go through this whole process all over again.
In your discussion here at the annual meeting for our members, you mentioned it's going to be the most costly Farm Bill ever. What are the dynamics behind that, and what are some of the programs that Farm Bureau really needs to protect for our members?
CBO, Congressional Budget Office, has said that the Farm Bill could be anywhere from like $1.3 to $1.5 trillion, the most expensive one yet. But when we're looking at making sure that as we work this Farm Bill process, that the Farm Bill is maintained, it's kept together, meaning you have the nutrition programs and the farm programs stay together that are not separated. But obviously, number one is going to be crop insurance because that is the cornerstone of the farm safety net. Making sure that we have risk management tools not only available through RMA but also through FSA, making sure that working lands programs like EQIP, CSP, which are programs that are heavily utilized here in Iowa, remain viable, and that they have the certainty that the funding will be available for those programs. Because right now, on some of these conservation programs, they're oversubscribed, and USDA doesn't have the resources to do it. So making sure that USDA has the resources that they need to carry out their mission and to serve the producers of this country.
Crop insurance is a very vital program to our farmers here in Iowa. We've gone through 3 years of drier than normal, bordering on drought. The whole state is in some stage of drought. And so this year there will be some crop insurance payments made, but it's also not a big pot of money farm bill when you consider the whole $1.3 trillion, but it is maybe one of those programs that some people outside of agriculture will come after.
Yeah, crop insurance has always had a target on its back, even going back to when it was first done back in the 30s. And, we've had changes made to it periodically over the different years. And crop insurance really came into its own in the early 2000s and has just expanded upon it. I mean, the program has grown significantly. You're over 500 different policies on different crops, anything from asparagus to zucchini, RMA can insure. But we want to make sure that crop insurance is a viable option to producers if the program is actuarially sound, being good stewards of taxpayer dollars, but also RMA having the flexibility to meet the needs of producers as agriculture tendencies change.
And another key point is the votes that are needed, 218 votes, I think, in the House and 60 votes in the Senate. This is really a piece of legislation that Farm Bureau always talks about needs to be unified. It needs to cross party lines. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier having that urban and rural coalition, making sure that rural members understand the needs of urban members and urban members understand the needs of rural members and their constituents. But at the end of the day, it's making sure that the Farm Bill comes together. You can't pass it with one party votes. It has to be bipartisan. It has always been bipartisan. And, to this day, we're going to make sure that we have the votes necessary to get this thing across the line.
And what do you see for the timing of this? We're going into a year, it's going to be an election year. So if this is going to get done, is it something that will be more likely or will be pushed to be early in the year?
We would like to have it as quick as possible, but also, with that haste, we want to make sure that's done correctly. We don't want to have to be going back and then having oversights and having to fix things one-off when we realize there may be a problem, making sure all our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted so that we can get a farm bill across the line to the president's desk that he can sign for the benefit of American producers and consumers.
Another issue that is very important here in Iowa with our hog industry is Prop 12. Most of our members, I think, know what Prop 12 is, but if you could give a brief description of what Prop 12 is, why it is such an issue, and some of the things that are being talked about to solve it.
Yeah, so Prop 12 is California had a ballot initiative that provided certain standards by which hogs and veal need to be raised. The Supreme Court said that, this is not a judicial issue, this is a congressional issue, interstate commerce. Congress, you need to go ahead and fix this. So very similar to 2016 GMO labeling, we need to make sure that we don't have a patchwork quilt of different state and local regulations as it relates to agriculture. That gives none of our members any certainty over where they're going to be able to sell their products. Then, quite frankly, Prop 12 has opened the door for other entities, whether they're states or municipalities, whatever, to go ahead and kind of promulgate their own version of Prop 12, whether it is dealing with organics, whether it is dealing with processing facilities. The sky is the limit.
Yeah, it's the nose under the camel's tent, essentially, where right now it's hogs, but if it's allowed to stand, it could be.
It could spill over into dairy, beef, poultry. It has the opportunity to be very detrimental to the livestock industry here in the United States and in Iowa.
And we'll be taking a group of farmers out to California in March for a sort of a week-long study tour, because it is, I think, the uncertainty, like you talk about, it's from producer to packer to retailer.
California is roughly 14% of all the pork consumption in the United States. They're a very large market, and I would not want to be a California resident where I couldn't find bacon or ham that was either on the shelves or at a price that I could afford.
And I think, talking with our economists, we already are seeing some of those price spikes out in California. Let's just wrap up maybe with a big picture. What are some of the things outside of agriculture and happening in Washington right now? We've had just a lot of division. How are the conversations outside of agriculture affecting passage of bills and things that, agriculture?
I think everything remains fluid. I'm from Michigan. If you don't like the weather, just wait another 20 minutes and it'll change. And, that's a lot what we're dealing with right now, going through the appropriations process. There were bills that were not even brought to the floor, couldn't get out of committee. There were bills that brought to the floor and failed. Everything is fluid because you don't know who's going to have an issue with something on this, whether it's the spending levels, whether it's a provision in the bill, things like that. Everything pretty much remains fluid, even with funding levels as they're, related to aid for, Ukraine or Israel, things like that. I mean, conversations are happening back and forth on both chambers, both the House and Senate, that still remain fluid. So all we can do is just wait and see and be prepared to react in a way that best benefits our members.
Well, it's not an easy road ahead of us in 2024, but we know that Iowa's farmers are always up for the challenge. And as our next guest will tell us, it wouldn't do us much good to complain about it anyway. Will Bowen has reached millions of people from more than 100 countries with his unique approach to turning complaints into constructive conversation. Will was the keynote speaker at Iowa Farm Bureau's annual meeting, and during that time he had a chance to sit down with Spokesman reporter Corey Munson. Will and Corey discussed how identifying and eliminating complaining from our lives can make each of us healthier and more effective.
Will, thank you so much for joining us. As creator of the Complaint Free Challenge, you spent the last 15 years or so crisscrossing the globe, encouraging folks to eliminate complaining from their lives. So my first question related to that is, what's wrong with a little complaint now and then?
I would say there's nothing wrong with a little complaint now and then. The challenge is that most people don't just do a little complaining. The average person complains 15 to 30 times every day, and they have no awareness they're doing it. I joke that complaining is like bad breath. You notice it when it comes out of somebody else's mouth, but not when it comes out of your own. Complaining has been shown to cause turnover in business, absenteeism in business. It has been shown to have a negative effect on our bodies, increasing the likelihood of obesity and diabetes, heart attack, stroke. And they have found that chronic complaining shrinks the hippocampus in your brain, which is responsible for creative thinking and learning. So in other words, chronic complaining makes you stupid. So there's a lot wrong with complaining.
Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came up with the idea for the Complaint-Free Challenge.
I was actually in Kansas City, Missouri, teaching a class on prosperity. People said they wanted to be more prosperous, but I took a moment and I thought about it, and I realized at that time, this was pre-pandemic, pre-housing crisis, etc., we were living in the healthiest, wealthiest time in human history. People came to me to teach them how to get more. That's what prosperity is. Prosperity is more, greater prosperity. The challenge is they were complaining about everything they already had. So Wayne Dyer put it so well. He said, if you're unhappy with what you have, why would you ever want more? Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me that prior to getting them to learn how to attract greater prosperity, I wanted them to learn how to appreciate what they have. Because the opposite of complaining is gratitude. That's literally, they are polar opposites, complaining and gratitude. Complaining is always about what is wrong and what is missing. Gratitude is always about what is present and what is working. So there was a woman named Edwin Gaines, and she suggested that people go 21 days in a row without complaining, because that would make it a habit. But it occurred to me you'd never go 21 days right out the chute. So what I did was I handed everybody these purple bracelets. And the idea is every time you catch yourself complaining, it's a rubber bracelet, just like the Livestrong bracelet. Take it off, you move it to the other wrist. Oh, I complained. Oh, I complained. And it makes it a mindfulness tool. And that's what really caused this to blow up. Within 30 days, we had requests for 9,000 bracelets. And this was before social media. I mean, this was people telling people about this challenge. And today, we're at over 15 million people in 106 countries. And I've written 5 books, sold 4 million copies in 40 languages. And I just sort of stumbled into all of it. Although I knew I wanted to make an impact in the world, I just never thought I would be the world authority on complaining.
Well, it seems like it's obviously resonated with people. So you want to kind of talk us through what are some of the changes you experienced personally when you started applying this to your own life?
You know, at first, it's a struggle because it is such a default way for people to communicate. People complain for 5 reasons, which I'd love to touch on. May I real quick?
Absolutely.
Remembered by the acronym GRIPE, G-R-I-P-E. People complain simply to get attention. I want to talk to Corey, but I don't know how to start a conversation, so I'll complain about how gray and snowy it is outside, or whatever. It's just a way of connecting. The R stands for remove responsibility. Corey says, hey, Will, I want you to do something, but I don't want to say to you, I'm not going to do it. I'd say, I'd love to, Corey, but it's snowing outside and it's gray. I will complain about the weather. Mm-hmm. The I stands for inspire envy. Inspire envy is another way of saying brag. It's not cool to brag about your good fortune. It's okay to complain about your good fortune and still accomplish the same thing. So people do. And the P in GRIPE stands for power. People complain simply to get other people on their side. This is why all social media at its core is based on complaining, all news media, and all politics. If you don't have a complaint, you do not have a campaign. So you've got to have something that is upsetting to you. I call this enrage and engage. The E in gripe stands for excuse poor performance. Now, this is like Corey says, hey, Will, I want you to do something, and I do it, but I do a bad job. But then I say, well, what do you want from me? It's snowy, it's whatever. So what I've noticed for myself is taking more responsibility in my life and feeling more comfortable in just being myself and not having to complain to others to enhance my social status, which is why people complain globally.
So in your experience then, having, applied this and interacted with folks who've also applied it, I am assuming you believe that this is achievable for anybody who's willing to put in the effort.
Yes, anybody. I have seen people who have taken the complaint-free challenge, which is the goal, put the bracelet on your wrist, switch it every time you complain, 21 days is your goal, and it's literally taken them years, but they have made it. And the other thing is, the number one side effect from people taking this is increased happiness. That's what they've told me. People said, I'm happier now just from taking this challenge because my focus is no longer on what's wrong and what's missing. It's focusing on what's good and what's working. Mm-hmm. And so people achieve greater happiness through doing this. And as a result, they just want to spread it to other people. It's exciting.
I would imagine also there's an aspect of this that you sort of found this trick. You found something that you experienced and yourself has worked. Mm-hmm. You seem excited to be able to share that with other people.
I love it. I love what I get to do. Yeah, I've been able to travel the world and speak in countries I'd never even heard of.
In all those travels then, have you found that this message translates no matter the career field people are in, their geography, their culture, their language?
It is amazing. Here I am speaking to the Iowa Farm Bureau. I spoke to the Pressurized Gas Association, I think 2 weeks ago. I've spoken to the American Ice Cream Association. I've spoken to so many banks and insurance companies and credit unions and doctors' offices. All of that to say, everyone that I speak to comes up and says, we farmers are the worst complainers there are, or we lawyers are the worst complainers there are, or we pressurized gas guys. It seems like everybody feels like they're the worst, but the truth of it is everybody complains, and they do it for all those same reasons.
You mentioned it. Agriculture specifically, we're no stranger to going through difficult times, as any industry is, but specifically with agriculture, when a farmer experiences adversity, experiences those tough times, how should they respond to that rather than heading down to the gas station and griping it up with their friends?
My speaking business is cyclical. There are times when we can't send the contracts out fast enough, and then it's like crickets for 6 weeks, and we're like, what is going on? And one of the things we say to ourselves is, I forgot who once said it, in times like this, it helps to remember there have always been times like this. And the other thing is, complaining to and with your fellow farmers there's a reason you do that. You bond, you connect. However, it doesn't improve the situation. So, one of the things I might recommend is continuing to maintain that social connection, but asking things like, do you remember a time when it was bad like this and how great it felt when it was over? Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? It's designed to elicit a positive response because we're all we're like in a van with 5 steering wheels if there's 5 of us together. And we're all guiding it somewhat. So we can begin to guide it that way.
So it's kind of just shift perspective a little bit. Let's just go a little bit to this direction away from maybe this direction.
Yeah. Like I said, complaining about it doesn't make it better. And if you think of anyone you really respect, in most cases, they're not really big complainers. They're so busy accomplishing something that they're not putting their creative energy behind what's wrong. So it just is helpful to begin to continue that connection, but at the same time, try not to throw mud on top of a mud pile. It really doesn't help.
Thank you, Will. It's fascinating to consider how simply changing our approach to communication can have such a profound impact, not just in our personal lives, but also in the world of agriculture. We all have the power to turn potential complaints into productive dialogue. Actually, your next chance to do that is just around the corner. The Iowa caucuses offer Iowa an exceptional opportunity to ensure that agriculture's priorities are considered when our nation selects its presidential nominees. And we'd encourage you to prepare for that opportunity on January 15th by reviewing the caucus materials that Iowa Farm Bureau has assembled for its members. Our Farmers Caucus site includes answers to your lingering caucus questions, including how, when, and where to caucus, and it also offers you some insights into where the candidates stand on the issues that matter most to agriculture. For all of that information, head out to iowafarmbureau.com/Farmers Caucus or click the link down in the notes for this episode. That's all for this episode of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. We hope that it sets a positive tone for your upcoming year and that you'll join us for the next episode on January 15th. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.